Hello, I'm Christian and welcome to Dark Portents. Today I have a special guest with me who I will introduce in a moment, but first, if you find yourself enjoying this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And now I'm going to introduce QuickGen, who is coming onto the channel for the first time. And if you like watching videos about Malazan, especially if you've finished the entire series, you should be subscribing to her channel for Malazan content. Now, QuickGen, why don't you briefly tell us about your channel and your history with Malazan?
Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here. I'll start with my channel. My channel really does kind of full spoilers, overviews of characters with a focus on humor, because I think that humor serves an important purpose in all art, literature, fiction, things like that, and that it particularly serves a purpose in this series. But it wasn't something I was hearing a lot of people talking about, and so I thought I would start the conversation myself. In terms of the books, I first read them, I want to say it was 2013, and I was looking just for a series that had good reviews and had been completed, and decided to start it when I had 3 young boys at home and had just gone back to school. So it seemed like the perfect time to dive into something like the Malazan Book of the Fallen, right? And I sped through all 10 books, read everything else out there, reread this series, and realized that I just spent an entire year in like a single fictional universe. And I was hooked. So I've read it 4 times in total, the main series, and all of the books, the novels of the Malazan Empire, Path to Ascendancy, Carcanis, everything that's out, basically. So.
What about the novella that Erikson posted to his Facebook wall and handed?
That one is beyond me. I need somebody to type it up because I cannot read that. I tried. I can't do it. I'm hoping somebody out there is going to put it into a format where I can actually read it.
So does Erikson have no plans to officially publish that one?
I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, it should be. I want to read it just because he has an entire character making fun of Joe Abercrombie, and Abercrombie's my second favorite author. Erikson's my favorite author, and so I want that. I want that beef. I remember we started talking not long before you actually started your channel. And when I first messaged you, I think I assumed you had, or when we first interacted, it might not have been when I first messaged you. I think I assumed you had a Malazan channel because I was like, QuickGen, what a great name for a channel, and then you didn't. And I was like, what, why? And you were like, actually, everybody's asking me this. So, and then you put out your video and it was the first video that Erikson shared. Your first video was the first video Erikson shared after all that drama we won't talk about. And that broke the ice, and now he's back to interacting with the Malazan community again on YouTube and stuff.
Yeah, in terms of first videos, it was a pretty phenomenal experience. Not the kind of thing you expect. That's awesome. Sure.
Oh, you mean getting Erikson to share it was a phenomenal experience?
Yeah. Just, I think, I don't know what most people do when they put their first video on YouTube, but I assume, maybe a couple of people will see it and maybe like it. And right. It got a very different response. It was exciting, but yeah, definitely unexpected.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't expect it either. And of course I didn't see the video, so because I haven't gotten that far in the series yet, but it's going to take me like 2 years to finish the series because I'm doing it with the green team of the Legendarium. So I can't do your 1 year read it all thing, but I want to read as much of it as I can, as fast as I can, while still sticking to the podcast schedule. So hopefully you can come back on when I read some of the novels, the Malazan Empire and stuff like that. So before we go any further, I just kind of wanted to introduce the topic that we're going to be discussing today and the spoiler policy. So we are going to be talking about Memories of Ice. And specifically, we're not just going to talk about the book in general. We're going to talk about the title of the book and the theme of that title as it recurs throughout the book. And the way that we've decided to do that is just to find all the quotes in the book that talk about Memories of Ice, which there are 7, I believe, or 8, it's like 7. I think it's 7. Right. And we're going to read them, and I'll put the text up hopefully when I'm editing this, so that the readers can see it as we're reading it. And then we'll discuss like each section as we go, and then, have any thoughts that we didn't get to while discussing them of the overall theme at the end. But before we get all the way into that, I did want to mention that for those of you who have been really wanting to watch Quick Jen's videos but can't because you're not far enough along in the series and it's full spoilers, she has done 2 other collaborations recently, and I will link them in the show notes, that are only spoilers up through Memories of Ice, or at least parts of them are only spoilers up through Memories of Ice, and they warn you before they spoil more. So one of those was a Mother's Day video that was with, was it 2 other?
Counselor of Moonspawn, who also has a really great channel on YouTube, and Ben, who is kind of a resident artist, and has done some of the art for Iskar, Jarak's and Ruth and Bad's channel.
All right, and then the other video was with Iskar, Jarak, and it was about the Bridgeburners, and a big old chunk of that, like an hour of Quick Gen content about the Bridgeburners that you can watch if you're able to watch this video. So there you go, check those out. And I guess I'll start us off by reading the first quote, and then we'll discuss it. This quote is in the prologue, and it says, "The breaking of the sorcery that had raised the glacial age returned to the region the old natural seasons, but the memories of mountain-high ice lingered. The exposed bedrock to the north was gouged and scrapped, its basins filled with boulders. The heavy silts that had been the floor of the inland sea still bubbled with escaping gases, as the land, freed of the enormous weight with the glaciers passing 8 years past, continued its slow ascent." God, it's hard to breathe reading a quote like that. So what do you think about the working of the title into this little segment here and how it speaks to the themes of the book?
All right. Is it okay if I start by telling everyone that in a very, very organized fashion, you and I actually decided to focus on this theme about 20 minutes before we were going to start recording, which I'm super excited about, but it also means that we're coming at this fresh, right?
Yeah, this is very on the fly.
Yeah. Like I don't have notes. I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it, but I'm really excited about the topic. So I think it's a super interesting way to approach it, and I'm looking forward to kind of picking this apart a little bit. So obviously on the surface, I mean, this really is just a scene about sort of the landscape around them and how it's been shaped by this ice that was there for thousands of years, I'm assuming. And it's also providing a little bit of context and history in terms of the war between the Jaghut and the Imass, because the ice existed because of that war, that this was ice created by the Jaghut, right? It's not naturally occurring. And it's still continuing to affect that landscape today. So you've got the silts and the gases, and we have this kind of sea of mud at this point that has trapped at some point the eye and the, what is it, Renag. But to me, like when I read this, I don't know, did I write in? I feel like when he's talking about memories of ice, I don't think in terms of memories of ice as in remembering ice, a physical thing, right? But rather memories as made of ice, memories that have like this ice sort of become lodged, right? When we think about ice, what do we think about? It really helped me out because I'm genuinely asking this question because I haven't thought this all the way through.
We think about something that's cold. And if it's not in the process of melting, it's hard. Maybe unforgiving if you want to stretch it a little bit.
Right. So
lacking warmth. Go ahead.
So we have this, it's all of those things, and we have this ice that doesn't exist anymore. It's gone, but we can see that it's left scars, right? So that just like with the Jaghut and the Imass, the memories, the events, the history has left their mark on them. And continues to do so, and continues to impact their actions and their choices. And I think that's a theme that we see throughout this entire book and in all the storylines, sort of the ways in which certain memories, because I don't think all memories are necessarily memories of ice, but certain memories become lodged, memories of regret, betrayal, a loss of trust, trauma. And what we see are a whole bunch of characters that have had those experiences and then are making choices based on those experiences, just like the Imass and their war with their Jaghut, and that those decisions based on these harbored resentments and feelings of betrayal are not necessarily the best decisions, right?
Right. And you said that you thought the ice might have been there for thousands of years, or because maybe, I don't know. So one thing we get at the beginning of this section, that's what I was looking up while you were talking. I was not listening. The what we get at the beginning of the section is that this is the 33rd Jaghut War that we're seeing take place, which, as we see later on in the section, the Jaghut War is them attacking like one Jaghut mother. And, presumably, if she had a partner before this moment, or anybody they killed in the process of going to kill her, basically. So what is that a war against, like 4 Jaghut tops? And the so it's the 33rd of these. I wonder how long 33 of these Jaghut wars take. Because a lot of Imass seem to bite it in these Jaghut wars, even though it's only against like single Jaghut or 4 or 5 Jaghut. It's a lot. So do you think it's been hundreds of years or thousands of years? Or this may be getting away from the point that you're making a little bit, but it kind of like gives an idea of how long those memories of ice have been building up, and how deep the starification might be at this point in the story, kind of thing.
No, I think it's a great balance, because you're really good at those details, and I am a big picture person. And I got to be honest, I have read these books 4 times, and in terms of the timelines and when things happened and the amount of time that passes between them, I still don't have a clear grasp on that. And I've heard Erikson say that basically he didn't concern himself too much with timelines, which that adds another layer of complexity to trying to break all of this down.
Right. Yeah. And I wasn't trying to monkey wrench our discussion here. I was just curious about it, and there may not be an answer. But it doesn't change the point that you're making regardless, right? Whether it's been hundreds of years or tens of years or thousands of years, it's not really, your point still stands. There's all this trauma, and who knows how long, like the Imass have also suffered under the rule of the Jaghut tyrants. because or how many of them there were. We don't really get a lot of these. We know they're a minority among the Jaghut, right? But we don't know, like, were there tens of them? Were there hundreds over before they were discovered? Or was it just like raced? What was the balance there? We don't really know, but we know that it caused a lot of death, a lot of suffering, and a lot of hardening of hearts, and that sort of speaks to what you were bringing up.
Yeah, they talk about it a little bit in this book, but we don't get a sense of when it happened, only that sort of from the beginning of the Imass as a people, there were Jaghut sort of ruling over them in one form or another.
From the beginning, you said?
I think that's what it says in this book, doesn't it?
Oh, really? If it does, I didn't catch it. That's something to know.
Now I can't remember who's telling the story.
I'll have to look into that later and see if it's in
I want to say it's in a part with Silver Fox, but I'm not, maybe during the second gathering. But that, yeah, essentially that it was presented as an argument for why this war was justified and why it was necessary. Why the decisions they had made had a reason, because it was the only possible way they could fight back. It was the only possible response in their minds.
Right on. I'm gonna have to look back through. I know part of the justification is just like, we don't want to suffer under this tyranny ever again, so we're gonna make sure that there's no Jaghut born to be tyrants, essentially. But yeah, that's some heavy stuff.
So if we so in essentially kind of that's their iceberg, that's their memories of ice. This is where it formed, were those early years under the tyrants, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what has informed every decision since then. And I don't think, I would not hold up the Imass as having made the best decisions necessarily.
No. I see. I've had this argument many times. There's somebody on the Green Team podcast who reviews Malazan with me, who is like dead set that the Imass, like, that there's no other like solution for the Imass, essentially. And I'm just like, I can't accept it. But
it's hard because we can't know, really, right? Because
right.
They didn't. We don't see. We only see what they did and the consequences of that.
Well, we can extrapolate that. Likely the only other solution is a quite imperfect one that could lead to many Imass dying in the process, which is just wait for tyrants to emerge, and however many Imass deaths it takes before you figure out who and what they are, and can then kill them, like kill the tyrants only, right? But that's a very dangerous solution from the Imass perspective.
I don't know if I thought about it that much before, but really, I mean, we know that the tyrants were exceptions, and that those tyrants were abhorrent to most of the Jaghut as well.
Right.
Which maybe the Imass were not capable of fighting the power of the Jaghut, but it seems like there may have been some opportunity or possibility to have the Jaghut take care of their own rather than declaring genocide, essentially, right?
Yeah. So the problem, of course, with that is that the I don't know how much time we want to spend on this, because we're talking about memories of ice and not trying to like hash out the geopolitics of the Jaghut Imass war, right? But the problem with that is that the Jaghut are like, they're like isolated all from each other. So it's not like you can like have a treaty with them. You have to have a treaty with each individual Jaghut, and it doesn't help that they're all arrogant and see the Imass as like beneath them. Even if they don't want to dominate them, they're not exactly the nicest guys to maybe negotiate with, and they want to be left alone. And then then you have to have either the Jaghut or the Imass notice there's a tyrant, alert the Jaghut you want to help you deal with the tyrant, and how many people die in the process. along the way. I'm not arguing that the IMAS made the right decision, by the way. I'm just pointing out the complicating factors despite completely disagreeing with their decision.
All right.
So,
You're right. We should not stay on this long, but you know what that made me think of too is how those cultural differences influenced the decisions that they made. Because the Imass are collective, and the worst thing you can do within the Imass culture is to leave, to separate yourself from the collective, to do something selfish or based on what you think is right instead of going with the group, right?
right.
And so when you see groups as collectives, then you also see the enemy as a collective rather than a set of individuals in which some are bad and some are good, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I
And
mean,
so genocide in that response, like if we're going to see this entire race as a single collective rather than a group of individuals, then in their minds, I can see like where they believe that the only response then is every single one.
yes, I can see what you're saying. I mean, I know quite a few people who identify pretty strongly with collectivism, and I don't think those people would necessarily condone the IMAS that we're viewing an entire species as like a monolithic collective, because there's different ways of doing collectivism, right? But I see what you're saying.
Yeah, all right, you're right. We need to I think we could go back and forth on this for a while.
We could. That could be a whole nother video. So did you want to take us away with the chapter 5 epigraph, or did you have anything else about the prologue you wanted to?
I talked quite a bit about that. Was there anything like that stood out to you when you read this?
Yeah. No, I think I'm good. You hit it pretty good, and we had a nice little chat about the geopolitics. So.
All right. So the next mention of Memories of Ice is from the chapter 5 epigraph, which is a poem. He rises bloodless from dust, with dead eyes that are pits, twin reaches to eternal pain. He is the lodestone to the gathering clan, made anew and dream-racked. The standard a rotted hide, the throne a bone cage, the king a ghost from dark fields of battle. And now the horn moans on this gray-clad dawn, drawing the disparate host to war, and the charging frenzy of unbidden memories of ice. Lay of the First Sword by Eirig Than Delusa.
Born 1091.
Yes.
So this epigraph is, I think, about Onos Toulon. Because
I read it that way too.
Yep. I mean, there's been other first swords in the history of this world, but most of them don't sound like they're skeletons. So I'm good to say this one's Tool. So what does it mean?
I feel like this one is really sort of building on a lot of the things that we just talked about with the epigraph, actually. This to war and the charging frenzy of unbidden memories of ice. That this is about their history and their memories and the way that all of it has led to this point, right?
Right.
But what it raises, well, and I suppose that this is raised a bit in the prologue too, when it talks about the scars left behind by the ice, but is the cost of that, right? Of carrying these memories of ice with them. The dead eyes that are pits, twin reaches to eternal pain.
Right.
That this is, there's a cost that comes with this, that it is hurting them as much as it is their enemy.
Yeah. And do we know anything up to this point about this Irig Thon Delusa? Does that sound like an IMAS name to you?
know, it's funny, when I read it, it did, but I don't know the first thing about, no, I do not have any additional context to add to this.
So I don't know for sure, but to me that seems like it fits with like the nomenclature of the Imass, right? And so this could be like an undead poet talking about what it's like to be amongst the Talana Imass, like using Onos Toulon as her or his subject.
It's an interesting idea, because we certainly at this point have not heard anything of any poets within the Imass. And we don't, as up to this point, we have not encountered any examples of Imass art. And there's a question of whether or not the undead can produce like the art, really. Like, is that
Right. Well, so here's why I think it might be an Imass poet, is because that first paragraph, with dead eyes that are pits, twin reaches to eternal pain. If I knew about the dating system, we could answer this better, because born 1091 might tell us something, right? But I don't know anything about it. So, but it seems like humans, well, I at least think it is probably not a human poet, or if it is, it's one writing after the events of this book, who's somehow got the story from Talk the Younger, or something, or from Tool himself. Because this twin reaches to eternal pain line is, it reminds me of the scene where Talk and Tool are talking about Kalava, and about and I don't remember exactly what triggers it, but Tool's voice like breaks when he's talking to Talk, and he is clearly expressing pain. And Talk says, that is the first time I've ever heard you speak in pain, or something like that, or speak or like express pain, or I forget the exact term, but he says this, and Tool responds, you that like you were mistaken, or
he wasn't listening carefully enough, or something like that.
Yeah,
he didn't hear the pain,
right. And the way Tool says it, he says it in a way that could be interpreted to mean, I wasn't speaking from pain, you're wrong. Or what is probably the case, that he never heard it before, but it was always there. And this kind of shows that even like Talk, who's like friends with Tool at this point, like, because he's a human, and because of the way that Tool comes off as like dry and kind of maybe monotone most of the time, that he doesn't see the constant pain that Tool is going through, right? Which kind of implies that most living beings, or at least humans, wouldn't notice that either. I mean, do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Which
yeah,
makes,
no, I don't.
yeah,
I think you're absolutely right about that. That whenever humans encounter the Talana Imass, I mean, one of the first things they talk about is sort of this like the bottomless eyes, and this sort of emotionless affect that goes along with that, right?
right.
And so
But whoever wrote this either knows or has seen that those eyes are twin reaches to eternal pain, and ties it into these unbidden memories of ice. So maybe it's Alana Imass, maybe somebody who's viewed them with a little more compassion than most people do. I don't know. If I figure out what 1091 means, maybe I can that can help me unlock the puzzle later on. But yeah. Do you have anything else for the epigraph that you want to poke at here?
No, not in terms of looking at the memories of ice piece. I mean, I think there's a lot in here we could tear apart a little bit, but if we want to try and stick to sort of the title and where and why it shows up in the book. I think.
I think it's time to move on to this
I think we got
dialogue.
most of it.
All right. And speaking of talking Tool, here we have in chapter 7 a dialogue between Tool and Talk. So Tool says, the plain is vast. He's replying to Talk. I don't know what Talk said, but the plain is vast, Tool replied. Also, there are the effects of the Talon Warren which surrounds me, though that is much weakened at the moment. Someone has drawn on my life force, almost to exhaustion. I actually didn't catch that or what it means before, so that kind of has me. We should talk about that. Someone has drawn on my life force almost to exhaustion. Ask me no questions regarding this. My Talon powers nonetheless discourage mortal beasts. Creatures are given to avoidance when able. We are, however, being trailed by a pack of Atog, yellow-haired wolves, but they yet remain shy. Curiosity may overcome that eventually. Talk's gaze returned to Baljag. Ancient memories, memories of ice. Wait. It looks like Talk is saying ancient memories. I think we might have missed a paragraph being here because the quote ends and then there's a new quote with nothing in between. So I think it's Talk saying ancient memories and Tool says memories of ice. The Jaghut and Imass's cavern eyes were fixed on the Malazan. By this and your earlier words, I conclude that something has occurred, a binding of souls between you and the eye. How? And then Talk says, I'm not aware of any binding of souls. He's still staring at the sleeping wolf. I was granted visions. We shared remembrances, I think. How? I don't know. There were emotions within it, Tool, enough to make one despair. After a moment, he returned to cleaning the scrawny creature beneath his hands. And then Tool says, every gift is edged. All right. So okay, I'm just curious. Do you know who has drawn on Tool's life force here almost to exhaustion? I know that's not really what the video is about. But I mean, I can edit it out if you do, and we don't want it in here. But
no, but I'm super curious about it because I can't remember, and I can't think of anything within the books that necessarily accounts for it. But you know what it made me think of is the Mibe, and
that's the first thing I thought of as well. Yep.
Yeah, it's the way Silver Fox draws on her. And at first I was thinking maybe this is part of the gathering and it's sort of the effect of him resisting the call, but really I think this is way too early in the books for that to have happened yet. So I'm pretty sure Silver Fox is still a child at this point. But maybe she had called them at that early.
Oh, sorry.
Maybe she had called them that early. Like part of me thought maybe it was the effort of resisting that call, but then I thought of the Mibe, and there is a point, I believe Pran Chol sort of takes on Silver Fox's anger as her father, but someone else steps up and says, you know, if you have a father, it's Tool. And so it's interesting that we have someone, you know, he's not actually her father, but
right.
I don't know who is really, right? And that as First Sword, this idea that she might be drawing on her father in a similar way to how she's drawing on her mother.
So you mentioned him resisting the call. I don't know that he does. Not that I've seen, because he starts out in Morn, all the way in the south, and he heads towards the gathering pretty much the entire time. He's just not on time because he's like in you know, doing all this other stuff along the way. I don't know that he does actually actively resist it.
You might be right, and I don't know where I got that idea from, because I know he's heading there, but I also had this idea that like he was doing his own thing and he was going to.
Well, they did say later on in the book, I don't think it's happened yet at this point that we're talking about, but they did say at some point that that he had kind of done his own thing, and like not necessarily resisting the gathering, but like forming his own moral decisions, and like not killing Raced, but helping the Azath capture him and that kind of stuff. And that like from the Imass point of view, like perverted him. And but I think he was planning on like kind of like facing justice at the gathering if he could make it in time, and then it just didn't happen. And we know where that went when he finally encountered Silver Fox.
Yeah. So to answer your question, I don't know, and it may be there's a really simple answer and we're just not thinking of it right now, but
because we haven't been reading this for 7 chapters. And so ancient memories of ice, and that's referring to,
so I think this is the first time we have this term that isn't sort of connected to the war between the Jaghut and the Imass.
Right.
Because it's Tool who says memories of ice, but they're actually talking about these wolf memories that Tok has had since he came out of the Rend, right?
Right.
And
which
connection.
Which the memories of ice in that case, I mean, there's obviously the literal memories because the eye live in these like kind of Arctic climates sometimes and whatever, but there's the memories of the wolves being separated for thousands of years, right? And that goes back to the sort of the scarring of gods and mortals from the fall of the crippled god in the prologue, right? Because the fall of the crippled god happens, it separates these two eye. They don't know how to find each other. One of them like tries to use the Warren of Chaos, I guess, to find their mate, or to like just retreat there to lick their wounds till they find Tok, right?
I don't know if it was a decision or not.
We got
one definitely did end up in chaos. Yes, that it was.
We actually did get a viewpoint from the wolf. There's one viewpoint directly from that wolf, and it's thinking about finding its mate. It's in the prologue, and thinking about like where to go and what to do, and like whether it should follow the elder gods. And it does choose. I don't know if it's like I'm gonna go on the Warren of Chaos, but it like makes a choice and goes into the Warren of Chaos. Like I don't know if it uses those terms, right? But it there's a thought process. I
remember that scene, but I felt like it was the wolf in chaos choosing to use Tok.
That's the next scene. So we actually do get 2 viewpoints from the one in the prologue and one very early when it meets Tok and it's like, this is a sign because it's missing the other eye, and let's see where this goes, and then after that we get no viewpoints directly from the eye that aren't like these like wolf visions where he like sees things through the other eye god's eyes.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I do think it was a choice, is what I'm getting at. I believe it's like a very short little piece, like 1 paragraph we get after Krull departs, basically. Anyway, tangents aplenty. Sorry. So yeah, anything else you want to say about memories of ice as it relates to these wolves?
I just think it's another example of sort of really major traumatic events sort of getting lodged, right? In our minds, and the way that informs and changes us, or in this case, the wolf. And the other thing I thought of, and I don't know if this is the right place, but when we were talking at the beginning about sort of the characteristics of ice, this idea of something hard and cold, and it can be broken, but it's also strong enough to carve valleys and mountains, right? But that the other aspect of that is that it can melt,
right?
And I think I'm probably going a little too far, but I don't think the wolves are going to come up again in any of the other examples here, that this is something that's connected to a direct event and a loss that resulted from it.
Right.
And that this memory of ice can be melted when they're brought back together, right? The scars are there, but they're still, they're able to be reunited. That was not fully thought through, but there you have it.
Well, and in a way, you just hit on something that's kind of a theme of the entire ending of the book, because you also have the Imass like releasing their pain to Ikovian later on in the book, and receiving sort of the warmth and feeling of their memories back, you know. And that is like that's another sense of the ice melting, and we can talk about that later. I think that might come up directly in the later quotes, but that,
if it doesn't, we definitely should come back to that, because it literally takes the form of ice when he kind of takes that on, and we have the absolution in the Beast Hold where it's coming down as hail and then turns into water and then feeds the land. So
oh my God, I totally missed that. I did the end on audiobook mostly, and I didn't catch that at all. So you can tell us about it later when we get there.
Oh, good. From the person who hasn't read the book in a couple years. It'll be a fun version.
I mean, maybe I read that part with my eyes and it just like, didn't absorb in my brain. I don't know, but it's easier to blame the audiobook.
All right. Well,
go ahead.
So you want to move on?
Unless you got something else.
Remember to come back to that later?
Yeah, because I believe one of these sections later is like about the Talani Imass directly. I could be wrong. Yeah. If not, we can just bring it up again. At least one is, because it's the second gathering. Okay. Whose turn is it? I don't even remember. It's yours.
It is. So the next one is from chapter 12, when Tak has just had dinner with the Panyan seer. Where every so often he's taken from the matron and healed, and the seer just talks to them like they're confidants, which is interesting. So Tak continued eating, feeling the life flow back into him, his lone eye fixed on the seer, narrowing at the power that had begun building around the old man's corpse. Cold, that sorcery, the smell of ice on the wind. Here are memories, ancient memories. Whose? And that's the end of that quote.
And then, of course, we know there are two answers to this question, because one is you have the memories of the Jaghut, and it's Amtos Felek that he's sensing, right? And then the other being the seer himself, the Jaghut tyrant, and his memories of being trapped in the rent and mourn, and being freed while his sister suffers, and having to deal with the trauma of what he went through and of losing his mother, and then seeking the Kachin Mala matron, who also went through similar traumas, coming out of the rent after being tortured for so long, having to dig her way out, find her children dead. Yeah. So those are the memories of ice in this case, I think.
I agree. This feels fairly straightforward, probably one of the most straightforward quotes, which makes me wonder if this isn't one of the first, or at least the most blatant clues of the identity of the Panyan seer.
Right.
Because I feel like it's blatant enough that it feels like this is sort of a, hey, this is who this is. This cold sorcery, the smell of ice, ancient memories.
Well, and of course, it it's either right after or right before, like in this scene, talk sees the Jaghut behind the seer. It's in the same scene, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
So this is either reinforcing something. I mean, it doesn't necessarily tell you it's that one from the Rent. You know, you can put it together probably, but I don't think it like explicitly says it in this scene. But it does tell you and show you that that it's a Jaghut.
Okay. So
And
he
that
knows it's a Jaghut at this point.
he either does now or like right after this. The scene ends with the tyrant seer giving talk to the Kachincha Mala matron. That's the end of the scene, I believe.
This is a different scene than I thought it was.
Well, if it's not, are there two scenes with talk and the tyrant before he gives them to the Kachincha Mala, or is it all one sequence?
I feel like there are points where so there's that initial interaction and then he's given to the matron, but I feel like there are points, or at least one point, where he's taken away and healed. Well, regularly they kind of take him and heal him and fix him up so that he can then go back to being crushed again. But that
right, and that is first
that there's a dinner, and maybe I'm remembering wrong.
No. So that is the first time we see like the real impact of talk being given to the Kachincha Mala matron, and that's in chapter 17. But I believe during the dinner scene, there talk realizes he's a Jaghut. The seer is like, wow, you realize that? All these mages can't realize that. Oh, he gives him venison instead of human meat, and he's like interested in him, and it looks like they're going to be buddies. And then talk has a vision of Baljag, and the seer misinterprets that as talk reaching out, or maybe he doesn't misinterpret it, but at least talk isn't consciously reaching out to try to undermine the seer. Maybe Tog is within talk, but at least for talk's conscious self, he doesn't know that like he has no control of it. It's just happening to him. And the seer misinterprets that and thinks talk is a liar and immediately gives him to the Kachincha Mala matron. But I don't think we get like anything more than just like, I think it like cuts off there. And then in chapter 17, then you get the hugging, bone breaking, I get healed every once in a while, the seer comes to see me and gloat, blah blah blah. I think it's all one sequence, and then the next time you see him, it's big hugs.
You have read this far more recently than I did. Actually, this is why I wanted to call at the beginning that this was sort of a last minute, hey, it'd be fun if we did this, because I swear I would have been better prepared.
Sure. Okay. Do we have anything more with this one, or do we want to go to chapter 19?
No, okay. That one feels pretty straightforward to me.
Okay, so we've got chapter 19, the second gathering. Krupp shivered. The air was pungent with undeath, the gelid exhalation of dying ice, filled with something like loss, despair, war, perhaps, after the seeming eternity, only its ashes. There is all about us, and this, I believe, is Krupp's internal monologue, ancient knowledge that cannot be denied. Yet Krupp wonders, are there memories, true memories, of enlivened flesh and the wind's caress, of the laughter of children, memories of love? When frozen between life and death, in the glacial in-between, what can exist of mortal feeling? Not even an echo, only memories of ice and no more than that. Gods below, such sorrow. Yeah, that's heavy. And this is actually pre it's giving us it's foreshadowing the Ecovian scene.
That's exactly what I was thinking, because Krupp's interpretation, I mean, it kind of starts us down the path of thinking about what is contained within these undead creatures that have lived so long and gone down this path of war and genocide. But his assessment isn't quite right. Only we don't know that really until Itkovian.
What do you mean?
Well, all right, maybe I'm misreading this now that I look at it. Because the first time I read it, I was thinking that he sort of concluded that because they're stuck, they're trapped, that they are the what can exist of mortal feeling, but not even an echo. This idea that the feelings aren't there, right? That they aren't carrying these with them.
Now, that's kind of contradicted by the end. He says gods below such sorrow at the end. So yeah. I think maybe he's just saying, I think maybe when he says what can exist of mortal feeling, he's not necessarily being literal. I think maybe he's meaning like the more warm feelings, affection, love, and so on, which we do see returned to the Imass with the Itkovian scene. But I think he's basically just saying like that all that they can hold on to in their memories is like the sorrow, the pain, the hardness, and not nothing warm. He's associating mortal feeling with like the warmer aspects of mortal feeling. I think personally that's
I think you're exactly right. And because the minute I started trying to explain what I was thinking, I'm like, I am reading this all wrong.
Well, it's Krupp's fault for associating mortal feeling only with the positive or the warmer aspects of mortal feeling.
Right. But he does say that earlier, true memories. And when he equates true memories, he thinks of living flesh and the feeling of the wind on your skin, laughter of children. And these are things that we know that the Imass have not truly experienced for thousands. I'm going to just throw out random numbers for many years.
Now we know it's hundreds of... It's about 300,000 years since the first gathering, I think. So I think we do have a date on that. If I'm wrong, just tell me in the comments, yell at me. But I think it's hundreds of thousands of years at this point. All right. Do you want to move on to chapter 25? We got a couple of them.
Yeah. All right, so
I do think real quick before you do this one, I think that we missed one. I do think there's some allusion to memories of ice with the Itkovian scene. We've got plenty to talk about the things, but we will have to return to that ice melting thing at the very end because it's not in here, the part where I would have brought it in. Go ahead.
I actually think this quote is going to get us there. So okay. This is Krupp with the Maybe in the dream world / beasthold place. Krupp gasped, lifting her, pulling at her arm. You must touch, lass. This world, it was made for you. Do you understand? A gift. There are things that must be freed. Freed. Yes, she understood that word. She longed for it, worshipped it, knelt, head bowed before its altar. Freed. Yes, that made sense. Like these memories of ice raining down upon us. Freed to feed the earth. Deliverance of meaning, of emotion, history's gift, the land underfoot, the layers, so many layers, to feed the earth. What place is this? Reach, dearest Maib, Krupp begs you. Touch. She raised a trembling hand. So she alludes to it a little bit, but I know there's another scene where it's more explicitly called out that when Itkovian takes on their pain, he takes on their memories, and that in that process that I could not begin to explain, it becomes what starts out as hail, and I think by the time it hits, it turns into rain,
Within the
it-
Mibes dream world, right?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't know how I missed that. I'm almost certain I read at least this scene multiple times, including with my eyes, and just did not catch that. So very smart and active reader over here.
So what I think, I guess, is interesting about this particular quote is it's the first, it's bringing us back to that prologue, in that we don't actually see ice in the prologue, right? There are memories of ice in the land, but what we see are the impacts that the ice had on that land. And we talked about the scars, and we talked about sort of the lake and the mud. But here, as the ice melts, it's turning into water, and there are other benefits to that, right? That this water is then feeding this land. And I think my favorite part of this, I'm gonna have to find it, is this sort of freed to feed the earth, deliverance of meaning, of emotion, history's gift. That this is sort of letting go of that ice, that coldness allows new life to form, allows something new to grow from that, allows some new thing to happen, right? And there's a lot of talk, I want to say, in this book about the way memories and history are connected to the land. We talk about the Reeve and the way, and their spirits and their connection to the land, right? Or with Itkovian, when he is taking on the pain and the suffering after Kapistan, he talks about that when there's death and when there is pain, it lays over the landscape, right? And that it lives in the land for years to come, that essentially the land is scarred by this, and that by taking that on, he was allowing the land to sort of be free of that again.
Wow. Yeah, that's some heavy stuff. I mean, yeah, and I guess that could maybe be a metaphor for, you could take it more like as like being literally a spiritual concept, and thinking about places where atrocities have taken place, and maybe there's like, something about like the collective knowledge that something like that happened, that puts a certain feel on that place, and it's sort of like literalizing something that's, maybe not literal. But you could also take it as maybe a metaphor for sort of the environmental consequences of things like wars, sieges, and things like that. So there's like, sort of a literal spiritual interpretation. It's weird to say literal spiritual, but I think you get what I'm saying here, because it's being talked about in the book like it's this spiritual concept. And then there's like more of a metaphor as well of how like our actions, especially social actions, like impact the world beyond just like human life and human suffering.
Mm-hmm. And both of those things, I think, are themes that we see in these books, beyond just this one, but I'm certain that it is within this
like
one.
Like the Oasis in Dead House Gates, when Coltane strips the Oasis of everything and blocks the water from refilling quickly, so that, and takes all the trees down, and basically like that whole oasis that was such a source of resources and life in a punishing desert because of this war, and because like what else is Coltane going to do? Like he can't think about the ecosystem. He's got to get the refugees out of there. So because of this whole war and rebellion and so forth, he is just destroying permanently, or at least like for the foreseeable future, the ability of this oasis to like give life. I think that's the biggest, like most obvious one from the first three books, beside that's not in this for this third one.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great example of yes, how these emotions we're talking about, like sort of these acts of revenge or anger or desperation, have an impact like physically in the world, right?
Yeah.
As well as emotionally and on each of us. And there's a connection there too between, I think, memories and history as well. I'm going to go, there are a couple of things I actually see there with this when he talks about history's gift, because there's a point when I think Paran is talking to Silver Fox, I want to say, and he talks about the fact that when that our memories are not history, and that when we view events through the lens of guilt or through the lens of betrayal, it changes the way those events are viewed, right? And so that to a certain extent, that this idea of deliverance, of meaning, of emotion, history's gift, that until you can let go of those resentments, that you can't truly understand the meaning of that history. The Barghast are another example, because there are people who have kind of lost their history.
Right.
And don't really have that connection, and so are forced to try and make decisions based on their imperfect understanding of the things that have come before them.
Right. And as they're discovering more about their past, and having to interact with their gods for the first time, who used to be like their forebears, it's forcing some uncomfortable truths to sort of surface that may affect the way the Barghast identity is shaped going forward, including about the Moranth and the Teist Edor. I mean, that could probably be its whole other video, especially once we get to book 5. I'm not there yet, but but I know it's coming.
I think Twist says it explicitly at some point too, that this is they've lost their own memories, or rather that they remember incorrectly.
Right. I mean, and of course, we'd have to take Twist's word for that. But
this idea is that memory and even history are not the same as the actual events, right?
Right. Yes. I mean, that's a huge theme in Malazan in general. All right. So we could probably keep going on that quote, but we're over an hour now since we started recording. Wow. So we should probably move on to the last quote, and maybe like eliminate this last question, because I think like we've covered it and are about to cover it even more. So just like delete that last thing and go on to chapter 25. Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right. Is this one me? It is. Okay. So this is a conversation between Quickbin and Paran. And it says, Quickbin and Talamondis had done something to the child, had worked their sorcery to take from her all memory of what had happened. Paran had sensed Hood's direct involvement in that. Only a god could manage such a thing. Not a simple blocking of memories, but an absolute taking away, a cleansing of the slate. Thus, the child had lost her brother, had found an uncle instead, but not a kindly one. The seer carries his own wounds after all. And now Byrne's realm had found new denizens, was now home to an ancient warren. Memories, Quickbin had said, of ice. There is heat within this chaotic poison, heat enough to destroy these servants. I need to find a way to slow the infection, to weaken the poison. And so we finally come to find that the title of the book and the entire point of all the events of the plot was the most complicated way to prescribe anti-inflammatory drugs to burn. um, but yeah, let's talk about this in terms of Memories of Ice, less flippantly.
I love that though, because it really, it's hinted at throughout that sort of there were layers to this threat, right? And that there was the seer, and then there was the matron, and the fact that there was chaos involved, and then behind that, the crippled god. And we end up coming back to this, that effect on Burn. And really, yeah, that Quickben found her an ice pack. She had a fever, and he found her a lovely ice pack in the form of the seer and his sister, which also provides them with sort of a safe space, both protecting the world from them, or people from these two, and protecting them from the outside world, the Imass, or whatever other threats there might be, and just be brother and sister, or uncle and niece. Because I think that was, which is a callback to the very beginning, when there's this idea that they're going to come through and find some other, through that rent into another warren, and find some other Jaghut to act as an aunt or an uncle, right? And she goes in with another child like herself, but when she comes out, that child is an adult, and so she's lost her brother, but she's found that uncle that Kalava told her would be on the other side.
Yeah, that puts a nice little bow on the entire thing, right? And so for her, that is what happened, and all those centuries of torture just didn't happen. And then also for Quickben, I mean, the whole time you're being told, oh, the seer is just like, it's sleight of hand, it's just this diversion, and the crippled god's the real threat, and going after this is like not really dealing with the threat. And Quickben still charges right ahead at the seer through the whole book. And you've got to think like, why isn't he talking to anybody about this? Why isn't he dealing with it? Why isn't he like trying to redirect? And then he redirects the diversion at alleviating the big problem, at least for now, So it's like, like he rechannels the sleight of hand, basically. Instead of like meeting the crippled god like this with force, he uses what the crippled god threw at everyone against the crippled god. It's quite brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Essentially takes two problems that the crippled god to some extent created, or at least took advantage of, and used them to solve each other, right?
Right.
Which this is kind of the pinnacle of Quickben being awesome, and Quickben
right.
right here.
Yep. I really liked this ending.
But we begin with this section with the act of Quickben taking those memories away from the child.
Right.
And I I do think that's significant. And I'm trying to think of where else it's touched on in here. I think I've done good on spoilers so far, right? Yes. Don't want to mess up at the end, but so I'm trying to think of just within this book where there might be examples. And to a certain extent, you could talk about what Itkovian has done for the Imass as a parallel to this.
Right.
But
it's kind of a reverse. And actually, this is what I was just thinking of is, and we do have to wrap up soon. I'm like falling asleep almost. But what I was thinking about was it's almost an inversion of both the concept of memories of ice and of the way that it's been treated up to this point, because with the Imass, they're giving up the pain and the memories of the pain and the hardness and all of that, and getting back their warmth and their memories of like the wind on their skin and all of that, right? And every time up to this point, memories of ice is being used as a negative thing. But here, Quickben's saying it's the opposite. He takes away, well, it's not really the opposite, because he is taking away the memory of her pain, but it's like I don't know. It's well, okay, I screwed up. Sorry. But at least the phrase memories of ice is being used positively here. The heat is within the chaotic poison. The heat is bad. And we have ice as something soothing here and something that's like relieving the infection. And it's his memories. He's talking about like the memory of like the Amtos Falak Warren, basically, before it's assailed by the Imass, and the memories of, extrapolate a little bit, the memories of the Jaghut, and their life maybe before they were constantly under assault from the Talon. And now we get memories of ice shown in a positive way, and the heat is the negative thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I'm going to build on it a little bit, where he talks about not a blocking of memories, because up until now, what we've seen is sort of this frozen thing, this thing that keeps people stuck. That these are memories that are blocking people for some reason, right? And that simply what Quickben knew was that just sort of putting another block on that didn't actually solve the problem. That what it needed to happen was a taking away, a cleansing of the slate. The ice needed to melt, so that those older, more positive memories can live again, and so that she can live again, and so that she can move forward.
And so we get a nice ending for both the Jaghut and the Imass of the book, not counting Raced, in that way, where they both kind of get that same ending in a different forms, different ways, different people delivering it, but they both get the same ending essentially.
That they're no longer like where they were at the beginning of this book, where they were trapped in this endless cycle. The eye and the Ranag stuck in the mud, just doomed to repeat, to stuck in the middle of a battle forever, right?
Yeah. All right.
That was fun, and I know it was this sort of was a last minute conversation that led to this switch, which means maybe that it wasn't all as fresh in our mind when we did it, but it was a really good idea. You had to go through the each section and pull it out like that, and it was a fun way to look at the book.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you said something that kind of triggered me to. I think we just like played off each other till we came to this idea, really. And it's unfortunate that it was at the last minute, because we might have been able to make all the same salient points without all the like stumbling and pauses and false starts, and it might have taken like a half hour less. But the viewers will get the beautiful mess that we have put together for them, and hopefully this appeases those who wanted more quick gen content that they can read when they've only read the first 3 books. I know I've at least got myself and a few other people who have been looking for, like really wanting to watch your videos but can't. So here we've given them another one. All right, ready to wrap up?
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks for coming on the channel, and I'd love to do this again with you soon if you want. And this is Dark Portent signing off.
Thank you.